Learning to tap into my instincts didn't happen because I suddenly became wiser. It happened because I spent years ignoring them and paying the price. Nobody wakes up planning to ruin their life. We drift off course through small, consistent choices that don't align with who we truly want to be. Instincts whisper long before life collapses, but ignoring them becomes easier with time. I eventually looked at my life and realized how many decisions felt wrong. My body had been signaling misalignment for years, yet I pushed those feelings aside without understanding why everything felt so persistently off. What surprised me most was that I didn't need a detailed plan of the person I wanted to become. My instincts already knew. Every time I acted against my values, a wave of discomfort would rise. But because I didn't understand the root cause, I blamed myself. Many struggles I faced weren't my fault. I simply didn't have the knowledge to interpret what was happening inside me. For decades, I carried anxiety that I thought was emotional weakness, never realizing it was a symptom of something deeper and more neurological. That misunderstanding shaped so much of my life. I didn't learn I had ADHD until I was 47. For most of my adult life, anxiety and overwhelm followed me everywhere. Later, I discovered this wasn't just from stress, but also from repressed trauma I didn't remember until my late 20s. The body keeps score, and mine carried memories I had long forgotten. That trauma, paired with undiagnosed ADHD and dyslexia, created constant internal chaos. I couldn't understand why I struggled with things that seemed effortless for others. Instead of recognizing neurological differences, I convinced myself something was wrong with me, fueling years of confusion and self-blame. Growing up in the 1970s, girls like me were rarely evaluated for ADHD or learning differences. Research focused almost entirely on boys, and because boys and girls expressed these issues differently, girls were overlooked. Boys with ADHD are often fidgety, disruptive, or impulsive, making their struggles visible. Girls internalize. We become withdrawn, overly reflective, self-critical, and anxious. Teachers saw us as quiet, not struggling. So instead of accurate diagnoses, many girls were told they had anxiety or emotional issues. A whole generation grew into adulthood misdiagnosed, misunderstood, and unsupported, believing something was wrong with their character instead of their neurology. The truth is, kids with undiagnosed learning differences walk into classrooms every day knowing they can't keep up. That uncertainty fuels chronic anxiety. They don't misbehave because they're careless. They do it because their nervous system is overwhelmed. I was one of those kids. I spent decades battling anxiety without knowing the real cause. I was medicated for almost 20 years on Zoloft, which helped stabilize me, but never addressed the underlying issues. I didn't know the truth, so I couldn't understand why I still struggled. Misdiagnosis didn't just affect my mental health. It shaped my entire self-perception. Things worsened when I became pregnant with my first daughter. I had to stop medication, and the combination of pregnancy, unresolved trauma, and untreated ADHD pushed me into a severe mental health crisis. The birth experience was traumatic, leaving me terrified and overwhelmed. I developed intense postpartum anxiety and depression. Doctors prescribed medication strong enough to keep me numb so that I wouldn't harm myself or the baby. For a period, I couldn't be left alone. Family and friends took turns staying with me. Those months were terrifying, a dark fog that consumed everything. But even then, something in me kept surviving. Ironically, women often discover their own ADHD only after their children are evaluated. That's exactly how it happened for me. Our son reached 4th grade and struggled daily, interrupting class, unable to focus, overwhelmed with anxiety. Teachers labeled him a problem. We sought a specialist outside the school system and finally received answers: dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD. Suddenly, everything made sense. My heart broke thinking of the countless children who never get evaluated because they lack resources. They get labeled difficult, lazy, or disruptive when they're actually working harder than anyone else in the room just to keep up. Understanding my son changed everything. His diagnosis wasn't a label, it was a roadmap. It helped to support his brain instead of blaming him for things he couldn't control. When I told his pediatrician how similar his symptoms sounded to mine, he immediately confirmed it. saying I was the most ADHD parent he worked with. He listed behaviors I never realized were signs: missing appointments, last-minute panics, forgetting forms, racing through life. Hearing it so directly was both shocking and comforting. For the first time, I felt seen instead of confused. It opened a door to understanding myself more deeply. When I asked why he never mentioned it, he laughed and said he wasn't my doctor. That conversation pushed me to get evaluated. When the results confirmed ADHD, I felt a wave of relief. But I also felt a deep sadness for my younger self. I mourned the confused teenager and overwhelmed young woman who tried so hard while unknowingly battling something internal. I finally understood that my behaviors weren't moral failings. They were neurological realities. Knowing the truth allowed me to reclaim parts of myself I had abandoned long ago. It felt like discovering an explanation for decades of struggle. I've been trying to work on this idea for a long time, and although I tend to frame it as theory, it really comes from honest autobiographical notes I've been wrestling with. The concept centers around something Viktor Frankl once said: when a person cannot find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Frankl suggested that a lack of meaning pushes people towards shallow comforts, avoiding the deeper void underneath. But there's another side to this idea that many people, including myself, often overlook, and understanding it changes how we see our own motivations. Frankl's lesser-known inverse law suggests that when a person cannot find a deep sense of pleasure, they distract themselves with meaning. This flips the entire conversation. Some of us are not running from discomfort by chasing pleasure. We are escaping joylessness by overcommitting to purpose. If ease, play, and simple happiness do not come naturally to you, you might compensate by endlessly chasing difficult, meaningful pursuits. It becomes easier to push yourself into challenges than to face the discomfort of moments when joy should appear but doesn't. Meaning becomes a refuge rather than a calling. People who fall into this trap become world champions of delayed gratification. They convince themselves that pushing happiness into the future is noble because gratitude and joy feel out of reach right now. So they choose the harder road every time, believing it's virtuous. The problem is that extreme delayed gratification results in no gratification at all. You push your rewards further and further away until the idea of joy becomes a distant mirage. You begin living entirely in the future, promising yourself relief that never arrives. Alan Watts once said that if we focus too much on improving our lives, we forget to live them. We are taught that the other side of discomfort holds something valuable. Difficult things are framed as inherently meaningful, so much so that non-valuable but difficult tasks sneak into our desires without us noticing. Just because something is challenging doesn't make it worthwhile, yet we train ourselves to believe it does. Many people excel at doing things well, and then assume the excellence itself justifies the effort. This mindset creates workaholics and insecure overachievers who seem, from the outside, to have transcended aimless pleasure. But beneath the surface, their hard work is often a coping mechanism, an elaborate structure built to avoid facing the fact that joy is hard for them to access. So they build identity around achievement instead. They tell themselves happiness will come tomorrow, but tomorrow behaves like the horizon. No matter how fast you move, you never reach it. Life becomes a cycle of striving without a rival. Eventually, this becomes a kind of self-imposed tax on joy. You sacrifice present happiness and devotion to your work, believing seriousness equals sophistication. You mistake relentless discipline for depth. You take advice meant for undermotivated people and turn it into a private religion. Henry David Thoreau once wrote that the price of anything is the amount of life you exchange for it. Many of us are making deposits into an account from which we never withdraw. We keep imagining a big future moment, yet we never allow ourselves to experience one. Permanently winning the marshmallow test, perpetually delaying gratification, means you never sit down to enjoy the reward you earned. Anticipation tricks you into believing something spectacular awaits, something that will make all the pain worthwhile. But in hindsight, it often looks like a string of exhausting successes where joy was always postponed. People reach milestones without feeling them. They rush past achievements because they've trained themselves to only value what comes next, not what exists now. At some point, you must allow yourself to do what matters to you in the present, not in some imaginary later. Many people say they want to write a book, spend more time with their aging parents, make art, or simply enjoy life when things settle down. But life's duties never fully disappear. The desk never clears itself. If something is important, waiting for the perfect moment is simply another form of avoidance. Oliver Burkeman writes that if you really mean it, you have to begin now, not someday. The challenges we're discussing are intertwined. The desire for ambition, but also compassion. The need for drive, but also gentleness with yourself. The instinct to delay gratification, but also the recognition that some people, especially overachievers, already understand discipline too well. Those people don't need more pressure. They need permission to ease up. For them, the advice isn't work harder, but let yourself feel something now. Delayed gratification only works if gratification eventually arrives. Otherwise, it becomes self-sabotage disguised as maturity. This brings us back to Frankl's Inverse Law. When a person cannot find pleasure, they distract themselves with meaning. I see this behavior in many of my friends and in myself. Pursuits become easier than joy. Work becomes easier than play. There's even an ancient Greek distinction where work literally meant not at leisure, implying leisure was the natural human state. But those who fall into this pattern flip the equation. Work becomes a default, and leisure becomes strange or even guilt-inducing. Many of us cling to the belief that building the life we want requires becoming a certain type of relentless, driven person. We think we must create a monster inside ourselves to escape our circumstances or surpass limitations we were born into. And in some cases, yes, you do need intensity. But intensity without limits burns everything down, including the joy you were trying to reach. The tool you built to save you becomes a thing that traps you. In medicine, there's a concept called the dose-response curve. Too little of a substance does nothing. The right amount helps. Too much becomes harmful. Effort works the same way. Not enough effort leads to failure or stagnation. The right amount leads to growth. Too much effort leads to burnout, emptiness, or disconnection. Many high achievers misread the curve and assume more is always better. But the curve punishes both extremes. Balance, frustratingly, is a thing most people struggle to recognize. Overthinkers and insecure overachievers must constantly ask themselves whether they need more effort or less. The tricky part is that these people often outwork everyone around them by default. Hard work is their comfort zone, not a stretch. And if you're regularly pushing harder than everyone else, maybe the challenge you actually need is not acceleration but restraint. Maybe the bravest thing is to release the pressure rather than increase it. Even in areas outside work, people often over-optimize. They analyze nutrition, exercise, habits, and routines to an extreme degree because controlling outcomes feels safer than confronting the emotional discomfort beneath the surface. Supplements, routines, and productivity systems become symbolic ways of convincing themselves that progress is happening, even if joy is still missing. The pursuit of improvement becomes an escape from the vulnerability of simply being human. Many people become experts at managing life rather than living it. They fill their days with structured tasks, measurable goals, and ambitious timelines, but they rarely create space for unplanned joy or simple presence. This avoidance is subtle. It looks productive. It earns praise. But beneath it is fear, the fear that if they stop striving, they'll be forced to confront boredom, emptiness, or unprocessed emotions. So they keep climbing, hoping achievement will fill the void. Eventually, they build lives full of accomplishments, but lacking memories. They can list their milestones, but struggle to recall moments of genuine happiness. They work tirelessly to construct a future that was supposed to feel free and fulfilling, yet they never train themselves to experience ease. Joy requires practice. Without it, joy feels foreign, even threatening. So success becomes a cage, not a reward. The work becomes their identity, because they never learn how to simply enjoy. The human tendency to delay joy is strong, especially among those who pride themselves on discipline. But delaying joy forever is a silent tragedy. Life doesn't guarantee a tomorrow that neatly rewards your sacrifices. Meaning is important, but so is pleasure. Ambition is valuable, but so is rest. Striving is necessary, but so is stillness. Without both sides, the life you're building risks becoming something you survive rather than something you love. If you want to write, create, love, or experience something deeply, you eventually have to do it now, not after your schedule clears, not after you earn a specific amount of money, not after you fix every part of yourself. Life will always give you reasons to wait, but meaning without pleasure becomes hollow, and pleasure without meaning becomes empty. The goal is not to choose one, but to let both coexist. Little by little, you must allow yourself to engage in the things you care about, even imperfectly. Joy is often found in small, unpolished moments rather than grand, completed achievements. If you don't practice accessing joy now, you will not magically access it later. The future version of you will not be more relaxed or spontaneous unless you teach the present version how to be. Joy is a skill, not a reward. The core truth is that you cannot live your entire life as preparation for living. The horizon will not move closer. The future will not suddenly begin. Life is happening in the spaces you're skipping over. Meaning matters deeply, but so does the ability to feel. And if you've been distracting yourself with purpose because pleasure feels out of reach, the bravest next step might not be another mission. It might be learning how to let yourself enjoy your time here, even just a little,